For 12 years, Dr. Sarah Chen searched the cosmos for alien life. She decoded the biology of extremophiles on Venus, mapped neural networks of silicon-based organisms on Titan, analyzed thousands of samples from distant exoplanets. Tonight, at 2:47 a.m., the aliens finally found her. And they had a message that would shatter everything she thought she knew about humanity. They told her something terrifying. Humans emit a light that no species in the galaxy can understand. Not metaphorically. Literally. We produce biophotons, measurable photonic emissions that create patterns so complex, so incomprehensible, that civilizations millions of years more advanced than us cannot decode them. And that light, the very thing that makes us uniquely human, is dying. We have 28 years left before it's gone forever. 2:47 a.m. The SETI Institute observation deck in New Mexico. Dr. Sarah Chen sat alone in the darkness, surrounded by 3 monitors displaying quantum spectroscopy data from the Kepler 442b probe. 12 years of searching for extraterrestrial life, and tonight she'd found something. But not what she expected. The biological samples from the exoplanet glowed on her screen. Bacterial colonies, fungal networks, even mineral deposits with protocellular activity. Each emitted measurable photonic signatures. Clean data. Understandable patterns. Everything catalogued, everything decoded. Then she pulled up the comparative Earth baseline. Human tissue samples. The control group she'd run 1,000 times. The photonic readings appeared. Biophoton emissions confirmed. Measurable. Visible in the data. But the pattern. Sarah's hand froze on the mouse. The AI analysis system had flagged it. Pattern classification. Error. Incomprehensible structure. She'd been studying alien biology for 12 years. She'd decoded the chemical languages of extremophiles living in sulfuric acid clouds on Venus. She'd mapped the neural networks of silicon-based organisms from Titan. But this? Humans? Her own species was showing up as the most alien thing in the entire database. Her hands trembled as she ran the analysis again. Same result. Subject: Homo sapiens. Biophotonic emission. Confirmed. Pattern classification. Error. Comparison to 10,247 catalogued species. No match found. And then the screen glitched. Not a technical malfunction. Sarah had seen enough equipment failures to recognize the difference. This was deliberate. Code appearing that shouldn't exist in an offline system. Letters forming one at a time as if typed by invisible hands. Finally. Someone is looking at the right data. We need to talk. AM. Sarah's rational mind immediately catalogued possibilities. Hacking. Colleague's prank. Stress-induced hallucination. She'd been sleeping in the lab 4 nights a week for the past 2 months. Maybe her mind was finally cracking. She typed with steady fingers, despite her racing pulse. Who is this? This is a secure network. The response appeared instantly, secure from humans. Not from us. Step outside. Observation deck. I'm already here. Every protocol in her scientist brain screamed. Security breach, report to IT, don't engage. But something deeper, the same instinct that had guided her through 12 years of discovery. The part of her that chose xenobiology because she wanted to find something beyond human understanding, whispered, go. Sarah Chen was 34 years old, unmarried, childless. Daughter of Chinese immigrants who'd sacrificed everything for her education. PhD from MIT at 27. Published in Nature 3 times. Her mother called every Sunday to ask when she'd find a husband, give her grandchildren, stop wasting her life on microbes nobody could see. Her last relationship had ended 3 years ago when David said, "You're more interested in bacteria on Europa than you are in me." He wasn't wrong. She'd missed his birthday because of a deadline. Forgot their anniversary during a conference. Eventually he stopped trying, and she felt relief. One less distraction from the work. But lately, something had shifted. Her father died 8 months ago. Sudden heart attack. 72 years old. Alive one moment, gone the next. She didn't cry at the funeral. Stayed strong for her mother, managed logistics, delivered a perfect eulogy that made everyone say how amazing she was, how well she was handling it. But now, at night, she felt empty. Not sad exactly. Just absent. Like something inside her had died too, but she couldn't access it to grieve it properly. She'd been sleeping in the lab more often. 4 nights a week. Told herself it was dedication, important research, breakthroughs that couldn't wait. But really? The apartment felt too quiet. Her father's absence too loud in spaces where his voice used to fill Sunday dinners. And now this. A message from AM on a system that couldn't receive external communications. Sarah stood, her chair rolling backward with a soft scrape against the floor. She walked to the observation deck door, hesitated with her hand on the handle. The last moment of normal reality. Once she opened this door, something would change. She could feel it. She opened the door. The observation deck was empty. 360-degree view of the New Mexico desert, stars blazing with impossible clarity against the black sky. No light pollution out here. Just the universe in all its indifferent vastness. The door sealed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. "Hello, Dr. Chen." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Not spoken words carried by air vibration, but transmitted directly into her auditory cortex. She knew this because she'd studied theoretical models of neural interface technology. This was decades beyond current human capability. "Where are you?" Her voice steady, despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "Everywhere. Specifically, I'm in orbit. But I'm projecting into your perceptual field. Turn around." Sarah turned. And there, impossible but undeniable, stood a figure. Humanoid in basic structure, but not human. Approximately 7 feet tall, slender, with skin that seemed to shimmer between solid matter and translucent energy. The body had the suggestion of anatomy, limbs and torso, but details kept shifting as if existing in multiple states simultaneously. No clear facial features, just the impression of a face, like a reflection on disturbed water. The being glowed. Not metaphorically. Actual light emission, soft and steady, illuminating the deck in pale blue luminescence. "My name is Arya Myst, though your linguistic structure struggles with the actual designation. You've been searching for us for 12 years. Now we've found you." Sarah's scientist brain took over, pushing past fear into analysis. "You're from Kepler 442b? The tissue samples I've been studying. Those samples are from our agricultural systems. We've been on 442b for 60,000 of your years. But we've been observing Earth for much longer. Specifically, we've been trying to understand humans." The being pulsed, brightness flickering. "And failing. Failing." Sarah's professional ego slightly bruised despite the cosmic absurdity of the conversation. "Failing completely," Arya Myst confirmed. "We've decoded the biology of 10,247 species across this galaxy. We understand their evolutionary pressures, predict their behaviors, comprehend their consciousness structures. We can map their thoughts, anticipate their choices, explain their existence." The being moved closer, though Sarah hadn't seen it walk. "But humans? You emit a light no species can understand." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Metaphor? Translation error? When you say light, I mean light. Photons. Electromagnetic radiation in the visible spectrum. You emit it constantly. Your science discovered this in 2009. Japanese researchers at Tohoku Institute proved what we've known for millennia. Humans produce biophotons. Sarah nodded slowly. "I know that research. It's metabolic. Chemical reactions in cells producing photon emissions as a byproduct. We glow strongest at 4 p.m., weakest at 10 a.m. The light comes primarily from the face, cheeks, forehead, neck. But it's too weak for human eyes to detect." "That's what your science believes," Arya Myst said. "It's not wrong, but it's profoundly incomplete. Like describing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony as vibrations in air. Technically accurate. Catastrophically insufficient." The being gestured, and the air between them shimmered like heat waves over desert sand. Sarah saw molecular structures appearing, data she recognized from her own research. Her own body rendered in three-dimensional light, photons radiating from her skin in subtle glow. You see yourself as your instruments measure you, Aria Myst narrated. Biophoton emissions. Weak but measurable. Simple patterns corresponding to metabolic states. The image shifted. Now Sarah saw herself through different eyes. Alien eyes. And the light was completely different. It wasn't just photons anymore. It was structured information, but in patterns that defied every analytical framework she knew. Colors that didn't exist in the visible spectrum, mathematical relationships that violated known physics, emotional signatures encoded into quantum states that shouldn't be possible. We can measure the photons, Aria Myst explained, voice gentle but firm. Our instruments detect them. We can count them, track their wavelengths, monitor their emission rates. But we cannot decode what they mean. It's like the being paused, searching. Imagine reading sheet music perfectly. Every note, every rest, every dynamic marking clearly visible. But you've never heard sound. Never experienced music. The symbols are there, completely accessible. But the meaning? Absent. Sarah stared at her own light, rendered in alien perception. It moved, shifted, created cascading patterns that her scientist brain recognized as impossible. Information density that should violate thermodynamic laws. Coherence that shouldn't exist in biological systems. But why? Her voice barely a whisper. What makes human biophotons different from every other species? Because they're not just biological emissions, Aria Myst said. They're consciousness manifesting as light. And your consciousness, specifically your emotional consciousness, operates in a way no other species we've encountered does. The vision expanded. Sarah saw comparisons. Other species' biophotons displayed on the left. Steady, predictable patterns corresponding neatly to metabolic states. Human biophotons on the right. Wildly fluctuating, changing intensity and structure based on emotions, Sarah breathed. When you feel love, Aria Myst continued, your light transforms into patterns we've never seen in 10,000 species. When you grieve, it creates coherent structures that violate entropy. When you create art, music, poetry, your light dances in ways that should be physically impossible. And we cannot replicate it, cannot understand it, cannot predict it. The being pulsed brighter, and Sarah felt something like frustration radiating from it. We've mastered faster-than-light travel. We've decoded the genome of consciousness itself. We've mapped the quantum architecture of reality. But human emotional light? It remains completely, utterly, incomprehensibly beyond us. Sarah's legs felt weak. She moved to the observation deck railing, gripping the cold metal. Show me specific examples. Let me show you moments where your species' light manifested in ways that changed your history. The air shimmered again, and Sarah found herself inside a vision. Vienna, 1786. A small room, candlelight flickering. A man hunched over a desk, ink-stained fingers moving across paper with desperate speed. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, dying, composing his requiem. But from Aria Myst's perspective, the scene transformed. As Mozart wrote, his biophoton emissions created cascading patterns of light that filled the room like aurora borealis. The light didn't just correlate with the music, it was the music in another form. Pure emotion translated directly into photonic language. Grief, awe, transcendence, terror, beauty, all simultaneously present in quantum superposition. We studied him for months, Aria Myst narrated. Trying to understand how a dying human with organ failure and deteriorating neural function could produce such complexity of light. Our best translation. He was channeling something beyond individual consciousness. You call it inspiration. We call it incomprehensible. The vision shifted. Crimean War, 1854. Florence Nightingale walking through hospital wards at night, carrying her lamp. But from alien perspective, She wasn't just carrying light. She was the light. Her biophoton emissions intensified as she moved between dying soldiers, creating waves of photonic coherence that measurably affected their recovery rates. She didn't know, Arya Myst said, but her light was literally healing. Human compassion creates photonic coherence that affects other humans' cellular processes at the quantum level. We've tried to replicate this in our medical systems for 3,000 years. We cannot. Another shift. A montage of mothers across human history. Ancient Egypt, a woman holding her newborn beside the Nile. Medieval China, a peasant cradling her infant in a rice field. Modern New York, a doctor receiving her baby in a sterile delivery room. The moment of first contact between mother and child, identical across all of them. A supernova of photonic emission that synchronized mother and infant's biophotons into entangled quantum states. Light flowing between them, creating bonds that persisted across space, possibly across time. This, Arya Myst conveyed with something Sarah recognized as awe, is love made visible. You create quantum bonds through pure emotion. Your consciousness becomes shared, entangled in ways that violate everything we understand about individual identity. And we, beings who have mastered quantum mechanics completely, cannot understand how emotion creates this connection. The visions continued, accelerating. Every human death releasing a massive burst of biophotons. Documented in recent studies, but observed by Arya Myst's species for millennia. The light didn't disperse randomly. It created coherent patterns that lingered, structures that maintained integrity even after the body ceased functioning. Your consciousness doesn't extinguish, Arya Myst transmitted. It transforms. The light continues, but in a form we can no longer track with any instrument we've developed. You have entire spiritual traditions trying to explain this. Souls, afterlife, reincarnation, eternal consciousness. We simply observe. Something about human awareness persists in photonic form beyond biological death. Where it goes, we cannot follow. Sarah processed, her scientific training wrestling with metaphysical implications. But surely consciousness is just neural activity. When the brain dies. The brain is a receiver, not a generator, Arya Myst interrupted gently. We've proven this across 800 species with complex nervous systems. Consciousness uses the brain, but doesn't originate from it. When your brains die, the consciousness that was using them transitions to a photonic state we can observe briefly. Then, elsewhere. Human consciousness in particular creates stable photonic structures that persist. Other species' consciousness simply disperses. The vision shifted one final time. Present day. Arya Myst showed Sarah two comparison timelines. Humans 200 years ago. Bright, variable, intensely complex biophoton emissions. Humans now, dramatically dimmer, more predictable, approaching the baseline of other mammalian species. This is why I'm contacting you now, Arya Myst said, urgency entering the transmission. Your light is dying. Not because of disease or environmental pollution. Because you're becoming emotionally numb. The vision focused specifically on Sarah herself. Her own biophoton emission pattern over the last 8 months, since her father's death. Before, complex, variable light patterns. Spikes of intensity during conversations with her father. Soft glows during their Sunday dinners. Bright flashes when they laughed together. After, increasingly flat, predictable, dim. A steady decline toward baseline mammalian levels. The incomprehensible quality fading week by week. You represent a specific demographic, Dr. Chen. Highly educated, career-focused, emotionally isolated humans in developed nations. You were taught that emotions are inefficient. That reason should dominate feeling. That productivity matters more than presence. That being strong means not crying. Sarah saw her own life reflected in the data. Throwing herself into work immediately after her father died instead of grieving. Ending her relationship with David because vulnerability felt like weakness. Sleeping in the lab because silence at home forced her to feel things she'd learned to suppress. Your father's death should have created a massive biophoton event, Arya Myst continued. Grief is one of the most powerful emotional states humans experience. It should have produced light signatures visible from orbit. But you suppressed it. Went numb instead of feeling. And your light. The being gestured at the data. Look at it now. Sarah saw herself as Emit saw her. A dim flicker, barely distinguishable from a laboratory mouse, a household plant, a non-conscious object. The incomprehensible pattern that made her human, almost gone. I'm not alive. Her voice broke on the last word. You're biologically alive. Heart beating, lungs breathing, neurons firing. But the light that makes you human, the consciousness that we've studied for millennia because we cannot comprehend it, the emotional depth that creates the incomprehensible pattern, it's atrophying. And you're not alone. Billions of humans are dimming simultaneously. Emit showed Sarah the global data. Charts, statistics, patterns across populations. Depression rates, highest in recorded human history. Emotional connection, measured at all-time lows. Screen addiction, replacing face-to-face presence at unprecedented rates. Suicide rates, rising specifically in demographics with every material advantage. You're dying inside while your bodies keep functioning, the being transmitted. And when the light dies completely, you become like us. Efficient, logical, technologically advanced, successful by every material measure. But without the capacity for deep feeling that makes you uniquely, incomprehensibly human. Sarah felt tears forming. The first tears since her father's funeral 8 months ago. Why do you care? If you don't understand our light, why does it matter to you if we lose it? Because, Emit said, and for the first time Sarah heard something like emotion in the transmission, we are empty. We have everything except what you have. We can travel between stars, but we cannot write poetry that moves us to tears. We can cure any disease, but we cannot love someone so deeply that their loss shatters us. We can understand the mathematics of the universe, but we cannot create art from pain. The being moved closer. Your light is proof that consciousness can be more than efficient problem-solving. That existence can transcend mere survival and reproduction. You are the only species showing us that meaning, beauty, love, these aren't just evolutionary tricks. They're real. They manifest as literal, measurable light that defies our understanding. And if we lose it? Sarah whispered. Then the galaxy loses its only evidence that consciousness can be incomprehensible. That existence can be more than logical. That the universe can create something we, with all our advancement, can never replicate. Emit pulsed dimmer. We become alone in a new way. Alone with the knowledge that something beyond us existed briefly, then chose to extinguish itself. Sarah processed the weight of that. You said you can help with technology. You've prevented disasters, cured diseases. Can't you just fix our light? Restore it somehow? No, Emit said simply. And this is crucial for you to understand. Let me show you what we can and cannot do. The vision shifted again. October 1962. Cuban Missile Crisis. Soviet submarine B-59 in the depths of the North Atlantic. Crew under extreme stress, communications cut off, believing World War III had already begun. Commander Valentin Savitsky ordering the launch of a nuclear torpedo that would trigger global thermonuclear war. Official history says Officer Vasily Arkhipov convinced the commander not to launch, Emit narrated. But the truth, the launch systems inexplicably disabled themselves. Electrical circuits burned out without identifiable cause. The torpedo could not be launched regardless of human decision. Our intervention saved approximately 300 million lives in the first 48 hours. More visions, rapid succession. September 26, 1983. Soviet warning system detecting launch of 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles from the United States. Duty officer Stanislav Petrov hesitating when protocol demanded immediate retaliation. We amplified his natural hesitation, Emit transmitted. Not mind control, but intensification of survival instinct. Doubt that would normally be ignored under military protocol became strong enough to violate orders. Without our intervention, Soviet retaliation would have launched in 7 minutes. Norwegian scientific rocket detected by Russian systems as possible nuclear attack. President Yeltsin with nuclear briefcase opened for the first time in history. We manipulated telemetry data for clarity. Made the trajectory appear unequivocally scientific, not military. Chelyabinsk asteroid over Russia. We diverted it sufficiently so impact would be on uninhabited area, not on a city of 1.5 million. A timeline marked with dozens of invisible interventions scrolling past. Every intervention, Aria MYST conveyed, was carried out under specific parameters. To protect humanity from external extinction. To disable weapons, deflect asteroids, neutralize dangerous experiments. These are threats we can and do prevent because they're physical, tangible, technological. Sarah saw the pattern. All interventions focused on preventing mass physical death. All this without humanity knowing. Governments weren't informed. Some governments suspect. Classified documents speculate about unexplained weapons failures. But without proof. And we prefer it that way. Constant knowledge of protection would generate psychological dependence. We can take any risk because aliens will save us. Which would violate the principle of maturation through free choices, not through a visible safety net. The vision shifted from historical events to everyday moments. A middle-aged man sitting alone in his apartment, television on but not watching. Blank stare. Empty eyes. Observe. Aria MYST transmitted. This man is not in danger from nuclear bombs or asteroids. He's in danger of internal collapse. Chronic loneliness corroding his will to live. But this, Dr. Chen, we cannot prevent. We can disable nuclear warheads remotely, but we cannot force a human to feel connected. That would violate free will. The scene changed. A couple sitting in silence during dinner, each on their smartphone. 20 years of marriage, but zero emotional connection visible in their dimming biophoton emissions. These two aren't being attacked externally. They're collapsing internally. Their capacity for intimacy atrophied by decades of avoidance. But we can't force them to connect. They can only consciously choose vulnerability. And most don't choose it because vulnerability is scarier than a distant bomb. Sarah recognized uncomfortable similarity to her own marriage that never happened. Relationships that failed because she couldn't access vulnerability. So you just watch humanity collapsing internally. We watch because we must, Aria MYST replied. Because the principle governing the Galactic Federation is absolute. Free will cannot be violated, even to save a species from itself. We can save bodies from external destruction. But we cannot save consciousness from inner emptiness. That is a battle each species must fight alone. The being offered an analogy: if parents solve all their child's problems, the child never learns problem solving. Becomes a dependent, fragile adult. The same principle applies to species. If we forced humanity to love, to connect, to feel, you would do those things. But you wouldn't understand why. And at the first difficulty after our departure, you would collapse again because the change was imposed, not chosen. Sarah processed the relentless logic. But letting a species die internally to learn a lesson seems cruel. It's not cruelty. It's respect for autonomy. Aria MYST conveyed without emotion but with clarity. A species that cannot freely choose to fail cannot freely choose to evolve. Evolution without choice is not evolution, it's programming. The Federation doesn't want a galaxy of programmed species. We want a confederation of species matured through free choices. But there's a timeline, isn't there? Sarah asked, dread building. You said our light is dying. How long before it becomes irreversible? 28 years, Aria MYST said. 1 human generation. Show me what happens if nothing changes. The air shimmered, and Sarah found herself inside a vision of probable futures. Children born today reach adulthood. Raised by parents who scrolled through phones instead of making eye contact. Educated by systems optimized for test scores, not emotional development. socialized through screens instead of physical presence. Their neural pathways formed around constant stimulation, shallow interaction, emotional avoidance. No reference point for deep feeling because they never witnessed adults modeling it. Aria MYST showed Sarah the biophoton data, these 30-year-olds emitting light patterns indistinguishable from other mammals. The incomprehensible quality that made them human, gone. Not through disease or disaster. Through atrophy. The last generation capable of deep feeling enters old age. They watch their children and grandchildren form relationships without intimacy. Marriage contracts negotiated like business deals. Children created through artificial means because natural conception requires vulnerability they cannot access. Therapists report epidemic levels of patients who cannot access any emotional depth. Not due to trauma or chemical imbalance, but due to neurological incapacity. The brain structures that process complex emotions atrophied beyond recovery. Like muscles that withered from never being used. Human civilization is functionally perfect. AI manages resources with flawless efficiency. Disease conquered through genetic engineering. Conflict minimized through behavioral prediction algorithms. Every human need met. But creativity, extinct. Art, generated by algorithms, consumed without emotional response. Music, mathematically optimized for neural pleasure centers, creating physical sensation without meaning. Love, contractual arrangements for genetic combination and resource sharing. Sex, recreational physical activity, completely divorced from emotional connection. Every human living an existence of technical success and total emptiness. From our perspective, Aria MYST narrated, you become like us. Efficient. Advanced. Emotionally empty. You solve every problem except the one that matters. Why any of it means anything. Birth rates collapse globally. Not from policy or poverty. From fundamental disinterest. Humans incapable of forming connections deep enough to desire creating a family. The vulnerability required for parenting. Neurologically impossible for generations raised in numbness. The last natural birth, 2198. After that, artificial gestation continues for several decades. But even that ends because consciousness without light loses the will to perpetuate itself. The last human dies. Not violently. Not even sadly. Just stops. No final words. No meaning. No light. The species that emitted incomprehensible patterns of consciousness, that created art from suffering, that loved despite certainty of loss, that chose vulnerability in a universe of danger, flickers out. Leaving behind perfectly preserved cities, impeccable technology, extensive databases of knowledge, and absolute silence. And the galaxy, Aria MYST conveyed with genuine sorrow Sarah could feel radiating from the being. Loses the only consciousness that helped us understand what we're missing. You were the species that could feel deeply, love fiercely, grieve honestly, create beauty from pain. Without you, the universe is diminished in a way I cannot fully articulate. Because the thing you provided was, by definition, incomprehensible to us. Sarah found herself crying. Fully, openly crying for the first time since her father's funeral. Tears streaming down her face, body shaking with sobs that felt like they were releasing 8 months of accumulated grief. So we just go extinct. Her voice broken. And you watch because interfering would violate free will. We watch because we must, Aria MYST confirmed. Because saving you by forcing you to feel would destroy the very thing we're trying to preserve. A species that chooses numbness and dies is tragic. But a species forced to feel without choice never truly lives. They become puppets. And we don't want puppets. We want the incomprehensible light. The being moved closer, and Sarah felt warmth radiating from it. But extinction is not inevitable, Dr. Chen. The trajectory can change. You, personally, are at a threshold moment. The vision shifted to show Sarah 2 paths, branching from this exact moment. Keep sleeping in the lab to avoid her father's absence. Pour everything into work. Publish papers. Win grants. Achieve professional recognition. Die at 68. Accomplished by every external measure, having never truly lived. Light diminishing month by month until it reaches baseline mammalian levels. Becoming, in the only way that matters, no longer human. Allow the grief to be fully felt. Reconnect with her mother beyond duty calls. Risk vulnerability in relationships despite certainty of eventual loss. Let the pain of her father's death transform into depth of presence. Light intensifying, affecting others, creating ripples that spread through her social networks. The window is now. Aria MYST transmitted with urgency. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Because each day you choose numbness, neural pathways strengthen toward permanent incapacity. But each day you choose to feel, even painfully, you restore the light. And you're not random, Sarah Chen. You weren't chosen arbitrarily. 63 scientists globally received similar contact this week, each studying alien life while overlooking the mystery of human consciousness. Each emotionally isolated. Each at their own threshold between light and darkness. If enough humans in positions of influence, scientists, artists, educators, parents, choose to reclaim emotional depth, the cultural shift cascades. Not everyone needs to change. Just critical mass, 3%. 3% of 8 billion is 240 million humans consciously choosing vulnerability over numbness. That creates enough morphogenetic field resonance to awaken others. The light becomes contagious. Those who've forgotten how to feel remember when they witness others feeling genuinely. Sarah wiped tears from her face. What do I do? Specifically, not metaphorically. 3 practices, Aria MYST said. Specific. Daily. Non-negotiable if you want your light to return. Practice 1. 20 minutes each morning. Conscious feeling. Not meditation, not prayer, not problem solving. Just presence with whatever emotion you've been suppressing. For you, Sarah, grief. Sit with your father's absence. Don't analyze it. Don't solve it. Don't make it mean something. Just feel it. Your mind will scream this is pointless. That you have work deadlines, grant proposals, important research. That's resistance, proof you're touching what needs to heal. The light returns when you stop running from pain. Sarah's immediate thought, but I have the Kepler data to analyze, the NASA meeting next week. And when you're dead, Aria MYST interrupted gently. Having never truly lived, will those meetings matter? Will the papers you published justify a life spent numb? 20 minutes. Every morning. No exceptions. Practice 2. Vulnerable connection with one specific person. Call your mother. Not a duty call. A real conversation. Tell her, I haven't properly grieved Dad because I was too busy being strong. I need to cry with you, not for you. This will be terrifying. You've built your identity around being the strong daughter, the successful scientist, the one who has it all together. Admitting you're broken will feel like dying. Do it anyway. Vulnerability with one person opens the door to genuine connection. And your mother has been waiting for you to be human with her, not just dutiful. Practice 3. Witnessing community. Find or form a group of people committed to honest feeling. Not therapy, not support group, mutual vulnerability. Scientists, artists, anyone willing to say, this is what I'm really feeling beneath my professional competence. Meet weekly. Share fears, griefs, joys without performance. Humans need witnesses. Your light intensifies when truly seen by others. Aria MYST conveyed expected timeline. Weeks 1 through 2. Psychological agony. Resistance. This isn't working. Your ego screaming to go back to comfortable numbness. Weeks 3 through 4. First genuine emotional releases. Crying that's been delayed 8 months. Grief finally felt. Weeks 5 through 8. Biophoton emissions measurably increasing. Sleep normalizing. Energy returning. Weeks 9 through 12. Others noticing, you seem different. More alive. Relationships naturally deepening. Month 4 onward. Light stable. Relationship with mother transformed. Community forming organically. The incomprehensible pattern fully restored. And your individual choice matters cosmically, the being continued. Because you're connected to 427 other humans through professional networks, family, community. When your light brightens, there's response. Unconsciously at first, but eventually, subconsciously. This is morphogenetic field resonance. When enough members of a species learn a new behavior, it becomes accessible to all members. The 100th monkey phenomenon. Except here, when 3% of humans reclaim deep feeling, the light becomes visible to others who've forgotten it existed. You are not alone in this, Sarah. You're part of an awakening happening globally. 63 scientists this week. Thousands of artists, teachers, parents in coming months. Each choosing vulnerability over numbness. And when the light reaches threshold visibility, the cascade accelerates exponentially. Your father's death was not random tragedy. It was an invitation. Wake up now, before the window closes. Sarah felt truth resonating in every word, but also fear. If I do the practices, will my father's light still exist somewhere? You said consciousness persists. His light transformed at death into a form I cannot track with any instrument or framework we've developed, Aria Myst said. But I can tell you this, consciousness structured by deep love does not simply extinguish. Where it goes, I don't know. But that you connected with him through vulnerability means your lights are quantum entangled. That entanglement doesn't end with biological death. Some humans call this eternal soul. Others dismiss it as comforting delusion. I can only tell you what we observe. The light persists in a form that transcends our comprehension. Which means your father's consciousness, fundamentally, still exists. Somewhere. Somehow. Sarah felt something releasing in her chest. Not certainty, but hope. When do I start? Tomorrow morning. No, Aria Myst said firmly. The first practice begins in 90 seconds. Right now. Don't return to your desk. Don't check email. Don't process this intellectually. Sit here on this observation deck for 20 minutes. Allow every suppressed emotion about your father to surface. No solving. No moving on. Just feeling. Sarah's resistance flared immediately, but it's 3 in the morning. I need to finish the analysis, document this contact, prepare a report. The ego wanting to escape, the being conveyed gently. Stay. Feel. Your light depends on this moment. This specific choice. Right now. Aria Myst began to fade, form dissolving into translucent shimmer. I won't be visible, but I'm watching from orbit. Your light is already brightening in anticipation of the choice you're about to make. Choose feeling. Choose life. Choose to remain incomprehensible rather than becoming understandable. And Sarah. The voice growing fainter. Thank you. For looking at the right data. For being willing to see what you've been avoiding. For choosing this conversation over comfortable skepticism. The galaxy needs your light. But more importantly, you need your light. It's what makes existence worth experiencing rather than just enduring. The being dissolved completely into starlight, leaving Sarah alone. 3:17 a.m. The vastness of space above. The silence of the desert below. And inside, 8 months of unfelt grief pressing against walls she'd built from professional competence and practiced numbness. Sarah sat down on the observation deck floor, back against the railing. Closed her eyes. And for the first time since the funeral, let herself remember her father not as a problem to manage but as a person she loved and lost. The tears came. Not gentle. Tsunami. Her body shaking with sobs she'd held back for 240 days. Images flooding through. His laugh during Sunday dinners, his pride when she got into MIT, his confusion about her research but absolute faith she was brilliant, his final voicemail she'd never returned because she was too busy with a deadline. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered through tears. I'm so sorry I didn't call back. I'm sorry I didn't cry at your funeral. I'm sorry I've been numb instead of missing you. And the grief, finally allowed to exist, moved through her like electricity. Painful. Necessary. Real. 20 minutes passed without her noticing. Her face wet, throat raw, body exhausted. But her mind strangely clear. The emptiness she'd been carrying wasn't absence of feeling. It was presence of unfelt feeling, waiting to be acknowledged. Somewhere in orbit, invisible to human instruments, Emit observed Sarah Chen's biophoton emissions spike dramatically, creating patterns of coherent light that the being had studied for millennia but never understood. Grief made visible. Love made light. Consciousness choosing vulnerability. Incomprehensible. Beautiful. Absolutely, undeniably human. 3 months later, Dr. Sarah Chen was still a xenobiologist. Still at SETI Institute. Still brilliant. Still searching for answers in the cosmos. But fundamentally changed. She practiced 20 minutes every morning. Not always easy. Some days torturous, resistance screaming to skip it. Go straight to work, stay productively numb. But she stayed consistent. The grief transformed gradually. Not gone, but integrated. Her father's absence still painful, but the pain felt like love in another form. Proof she'd connected deeply enough for loss to matter. She called her mother 3 times a week now. Real conversations. They cried together about Dad. Laughed about memories. Talked about fear and hope and loneliness and connection. Things they'd never discussed when Sarah was performing the role of successful daughter. Last week her mother said, "I feel like I'm finally meeting you. The real you, not the perfect version." Sarah had cried hearing that. Good tears. She'd started a group, Scientists Who Feel. 8 researchers who met Tuesday evenings to share what was really happening beneath professional personas. No solutions offered, no problems solved. Just presence. Last session, Marcus, astrophysicist, 41, cried about his divorce. Linda, botanist, 56, shared her fear of becoming irrelevant as younger researchers published breakthrough papers. Sarah talked about her father, about the 8 months of numbness, about the alien encounter nobody believed but everyone somehow understood metaphorically. Nobody tried to fix anyone. Just witnessed each other's humanity. And Sarah's light, if she could see what Emit saw, blazing. Not constantly intense. Variable, complex, unpredictable. The incomprehensible pattern fully restored through daily choice to feel rather than numb. And something unexpected. Her science had improved. She was making connections between data points she would have missed 3 months ago. Intuitive leaps that led to genuine breakthroughs. As if emotional depth enhanced intellectual capacity rather than impeding it. Her latest research paper, Biophotonic Signatures as Indicators of Conscious Complexity. Controversial. Colleagues skeptical. But 12 other research teams globally had contacted her independently. They'd been observing similar patterns. The awakening was spreading. Sarah sat at her desk, different desk now. She'd stopped sleeping in the lab, reviewing data from last night's observations. Her phone rang. Mom. She answered immediately, no longer screening calls during work hours. Hi, Mom. Sarah. I just wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. For what? For being brave enough to feel. I know it's not easy. Your father would be proud too. Sarah felt tears forming. Let them. Thanks, Mom. That means everything. They talked for 10 minutes. Small talk about nothing important. But connection underneath every word. Light flowing between them across phone lines. Quantum entanglement of consciousness choosing relationship over isolation. After hanging up, Sarah opened her journal. New practice. Documenting the transformation. Entry. Day 87. We emit a light no species can understand. Not because we're superior, but because we're unique. Our consciousness combines deep feeling with free choice. We can love despite heartbreak, create despite suffering, connect despite fear of rejection. The light isn't proof of God or souls or cosmic purpose. It's simply what happens when consciousness chooses vulnerability over numbness. And that choice, made daily, moment by moment, is what makes us irreplaceable. I used to think emotions were distractions from important work. Now I understand. Emotions are the important work. Everything else is just application. The trajectory can change. is changing, has changed in me. 3%. 240 million. We're not there yet, but we're moving. Every person who chooses to feel instead of numb adds to critical mass. Every vulnerable conversation. Every grief fully felt. Every risk taken for love. The light is contagious. I see it in Mom. She's lighter now, more present. In my Tuesday group, people who were empty filling with life. In strangers at the grocery store who somehow seem more vivid, though maybe I'm just seeing them truly for the first time. Something is waking up. Not everyone sees it yet, but those of us who do have responsibility, not to preach, but to live it, to be the light we want to see return to the world. Dad, if consciousness persists like REMYST says, if you're somewhere in photonic form I can't detect, I'm finally grieving you properly. And through that grief, I'm finally living properly. Thank you for dying at the exact moment I needed to wake up. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. 28 years until the window closes. 1 generation to save consciousness from extinction by numbness. I choose light. Every day. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. That's how I honor what makes us human. Sarah closed the journal, returned to her data. But now she worked differently. Not as escape. As expression. Science as poetry. Analysis as art. Discovery as love letter to a universe that created consciousness capable of understanding itself. Her light blazed as she worked. Incomprehensible. Unmeasurable. Undeniably alive. If you've watched this far, you felt something. Maybe recognition. Maybe resistance. Maybe both. You might be thinking, this is beautiful fiction. Metaphor for emotional truth. Biophotons are real, but the alien stuff is obviously creative storytelling. And you're right. It is storytelling. But the truth underneath the story? UDO emit light. Literal, measurable, photonic light. Science proved this. Your biophotons exist whether you believe in metaphysical meaning or not. And the pattern of your light does correlate with emotional states. Research shows this. When you feel intensely, your emissions change in measurable ways. Whether that light is incomprehensible to alien species we've never met. Obviously, I can't prove that. But here's what I can tell you from lived experience. The emptiness you carry is real. The numbness you've normalized is not normal. And the capacity to feel deeply, love fully, grieve honestly, that you've suppressed because culture taught you emotions are weakness, that capacity is your light. When you numb yourself, distract yourself, perform competence while dying inside, your light dims. You become predictable, understandable, ordinary. Functionally alive but experientially dead. But when you choose vulnerability despite fear, when you feel grief instead of moving on, when you love knowing loss is inevitable, when you create from genuine emotion rather than calculated strategy, your light blazes. You become incomprehensible, not to aliens necessarily, but to the version of yourself that settled for comfortable numbness. So here's what I'm asking. 20 minutes tomorrow morning. Sit in silence. No phone, no music, no solving. Feel whatever emotion you've been avoiding. It will be uncomfortable. Do it anyway. 1 vulnerable conversation this week. With a parent, partner, friend. Say, I want to be real with you, not just functional. Risk being fully seen. Find your witnessing community. Or start one. People who'll choose honesty over performance. Who'll see your light even when you can't. Simple? Yes. Easy? No. Essential? Absolutely. Because whether the timeline is 28 years like in the story or longer or shorter, the truth remains. We're losing our capacity to feel deeply. Generation by generation, screen by screen, distraction by distraction. Children born today are being raised in environments of normalized numbness. Their neural pathways are forming around constant stimulation instead of genuine connection. And if this continues, they'll grow into adults incapable of the emotional depth that makes existence meaningful rather than just endured. But the trajectory can change. Not through everyone changing. Through critical mass. 3% choosing differently creates enough cultural shift to awaken others. Are you willing to be part of that 3%? Not because you're special. Because you're willing. Willing to feel despite pain. Willing to connect despite risk. Willing to live despite certainty of loss. That willingness is the light. This channel exists for people ready to explore what it means to be fully human in a world optimized for efficient numbness. If this story resonated, if something in you recognized truth beneath the fiction, subscribe for more content that challenges comfortable avoidance. Comment below. What emotion have you been avoiding? What would happen if you felt it fully instead of managing it? Your honesty might awaken someone else. Your light might help them remember theirs. And if you need deeper support, personalized guidance through this process of reclaiming emotional depth, my information is in the description. This isn't therapy. It's companionship for those choosing to feel in a culture of numbness. You're not here by accident. Something in this story was meant for you specifically. Maybe the confirmation you were looking for. Maybe the calling you finally heard. Maybe just a seed planted today that germinates tomorrow. What matters is you made it this far. And that's proof your light is still burning, still capable of recognizing itself in a story about consciousness choosing vulnerability. The question isn't whether you can reclaim your light. You can. The question is, will you? 28 years. One generation. The window is closing, but it's still open. And you're standing at the threshold right now. Choose feeling. Choose presence. Choose life. Choose to remain incomprehensible rather than becoming understandable. Your light was always there. You just forgot to look. Don't forget again. Welcome to the awakening.